like the past few weeks, the news cycle has given us nothing to work with. There's been no news, there's been no rumors. It's been sort of a dry spell in the Apple world that usually is overflowing with things to talk about.
Exactly. But I think hopefully that will switch soon. But until it does, I think we're just going to talk about the iPhone 15, what we're expecting to come in this next year, because we've actually heard a lot compared to other years. Like last year, we got a bunch of rumors that all turned out to be false, but we got a bunch of rumors. Now we actually have some more confirmed or semi-confirmed things to talk about. I guess we'll just start through the whole line. Most interestingly to me, well, maybe not most interestingly, but I'm really interested to see what Apple does with the regular iPhone 15 because the iPhone 14 now is, when they announced it, it seemed like the most boring update they'd ever done. And now that it's actually here, I think that's true. It is very boring. But what are we expecting for the iPhone 15 regular? Have we really even heard anything? I think it's mainly the, more exciting models, but I guess we've heard a few things, but what do you know? What are we expecting?
Honestly, I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that Apple is in a little bit of trouble. They haven't had a lot of success with those lower-end phones in recent years. Like the Mini was really a flop. The Plus, by all accounts, isn't doing all that hot. And also, like, the regular 14 just doesn't seem like it's a big seller. And what's funny is that there's this weird juxtaposition where Apple just can't sell the 14 or 14 Plus, while the 14 Pro and Pro Max are selling too well that they can't keep them in stock. Something's got to give. And one of the things I think is going to be so interesting to watch with the 15 and how these rumors progress is not really what Apple's going to do at the high end, because things are looking optimistic there, but what are they going to do at the low end? And there's been a lot of debate about cost and about cost savings and about features. And as of right now, we don't know what Apple's going to do with the regular 15. We'll talk about the features that we think are coming to all the phones and the models. But right now, I think it's safe to say, if we're going to play the safe card and go with the safe bet and the logical bet, Apple typically keeps their phone lineup the same for 2 generations. So we had the Mini with the 12 and the 13. The 14 introduced the Plus. So I think it's a safe bet to say that we probably will get a 15 Plus. I don't know if that's the right move, because I don't know if Apple needs to keep 4 iPhones in the lineup, but let's just go with the assumption that we will get a 15 Plus. So that would mean the lineup would look like this. You'd have an iPhone 15 at 6.1 inches, iPhone 15 Plus at 6.7, and iPhone 15 Pro at 6.1, and then there will be a 6.7-inch Pro Max, but we're hearing that's going to be actually renamed to potentially the iPhone 15 Ultra, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. But Matt, I first want to get sort of your first thoughts. Do you think that 4 iPhone lineup is what's going to happen? Is that the way to go? Do you think Apple would drastically shift course and just drop that 4th iPhone slot? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot because for the JFL, for the John Rettinger channel, I scripted a video kind of talking about the 14 Plus and why it's maybe not doing as well as it is. And I was racking my brain thinking about it. I think the obvious reason why the 14 Plus maybe is not doing as well is just the price. $100 more, you can get a 14 Pro. Sure, it's not the big screen, but it has so many more features. It's definitely worth it. And maybe that's the reason. Another reason could just be that it's just a regular iPhone 14 instead of a Pro, so people are just not gravitating towards it as much as they would, quickly. So maybe after the holidays, maybe it picks up sales. It's possible that would happen. And then another thing I was thinking, maybe this is all, I was just thinking about this when I was scripting, and I don't have any evidence for it, but is it possible, like these phones are a few years ahead, right? So, or at least a generation and a half ahead. So wouldn't that mean that this 14 Plus was developed, or the 14 series in general, was developed with or during COVID, during all the lockdowns, during all the issues? So is it possible that that's why it kind of sucks? Because it was the time when they couldn't really get in there and like develop something new? Is that possible?
I think it's definitely possible. I think probably a lot of the development of the 14 was done during the 12. So probably around 2020, I think that's very safe to say there was probably a 2-year window there. But I think you make a good point. I think what a lot of people don't understand is, why did that phone fail? Is it because it's a really boring update? Is it because the price difference between the 14 and 14 Plus and then the Pro and the Pro Max is so, relatively speaking, small that you get so much more? Or, like we've said all the time, do people say they want a large screen iPhone, but they really don't? They want a cheap phone. It's like, people
Right.
don't want a small phone, they want a cheap phone. Do people want a large phone or a cheap phone? I think it really comes down to price. If those phones are priced considerably less, I feel like it'd be a different story and you could better justify the lack of changes. Because if you take the Pro out of the equation, 14 and 14 Plus are still really good phones. Good processor, good screen, get the dynamic island out of here, good cameras. But when you put them sort of in that quad lineup, you've got all four there and you see the price, it's just really hard to justify not going up because you get so much more.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I would love to know the numbers. I mean, obviously, Apple runs these numbers and these stats way more in detail than we could ever do on our own. But I wonder how much it affects the lineup that the 13 is still for sale. Like, that can't help. Like, you walk into the store and they're literally the same phone except for colors. And I mean, technically there are differences. Like, you get the better selfie camera, you get the better rear camera,
very
you
small
get the colors,
differences.
but like, and you get the extra GPU core. Like, wow, which they don't really even advertise. It's still just the A15. So that can't help, right? Like, obviously that wouldn't affect the Plus as much because that's a different screen size, but I can't imagine people walking in the Apple store, or especially something you love to always mention, you go into a carrier store, these are the same phones, but you could save what, $2 a month or something on your bill. Like,
I wonder how
can't
Apple
help.
does this market research, because I feel like if I was filling out a survey about a phone I'd want and I was maybe someone who liked a large screen phone, the 14 Plus checks all those boxes. Big display, good battery life, good screen. In a bubble, it's a great phone. And I feel like if Apple was like examining like market research, like, oh, people really want this phone. But then if you look at the context of the Pro phones and those features and the price, it's like when you put it all together, I wonder if that's where the problem was. I'd have to imagine people much smarter than you and I are working at Apple and conducting this research. You'd have to imagine that they know how this is going to land. But I am just so curious, and we'll never know, as to why Apple's predictions for these phones were so wildly off, why they keep slashing and slashing production. They'd have to know they were going to get blowback for the very minimal changes, right?
I would expect so. Maybe they're thinking, the 14 Plus is enough reason why people were going to want it. Like, maybe in their head they are sacrificing the regular 14. They know no one's going to buy it, but maybe they were expecting that the 14 Plus would sell. And I'm still not convinced that it's like completely a dud. Obviously, right now it's a dud, but I still think over time, with the iPhone XR, it was kind of a similar story. Like, it didn't pick up very quickly, but it quickly became the most popular iPhone ever. Like, isn't that possible with the 14 Plus?
I
But then
think so.
you come back to the price, though. That's
Yeah.
really the issue, I think.
I remember the story with the 10R was, oh, the screen's terrible, and you heard like a lot of like bad. It got a bad rap in the tech community, but I don't know if that ever translated over to sales. So I'd have to
actual
go back
people
and
like
look, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I guess let's talk about a little bit more features. I think we are, or at least we've heard the rumor that the dynamic island will be coming over. Is that something you expect for the regular iPhones?
I think so, because the rumors we had heard last year was that we were going to get this double hole punch system. And then with the 2023 lineup with the 15, the double hole punch system would go to every phone. And no one has specifically said the dynamic island is going to every phone. But if Apple
That's
does
the same
do
thing.
this double hole punch system, you
Yeah.
can connect the dots. And it makes sense. They're marketing this so much that it would just be sort of a nice standard iPhone feature. I think that in and of itself is a nice feature for every single iPhone owner to get. And you don't have to have, $1,000 to get the dynamic island on your phone. I think that's going to be a really nice upgrade, especially for those who don't buy the Pros. It's going to be a great upgrade. Whether that's worth it or not, after living with this phone for a few months, I don't know if I really am all that crazy about it. But nevertheless, going to be nice to see it go to every iPhone next year.
Yeah, and then I guess the next question is, do you think we're going to see a new design? Because
That's
this would
the other
be,
question too. I hope
because
so.
I guess going back on since the iPhone 10, they've kind of done this 3-year cycle. So this would be the time to do a new design. Are we going to see it?
Mark Gurman said we will. even though I think he sort of said that last year. So hopefully I'll be optimistic that that's happening. And I think, again, talking about the differences here, we've heard that Apple is really going to make a concerted effort to not just differentiate the Pro from the Pro Max, but really separate the Pro from the non-Pro. And one of the things I'm thinking is, okay, so if we get this new design, and especially since cost is a major consideration, do the pros just get the new design? And then Apple is able to really increase their margins by reusing the same design again on the 15? Or do you think they have to do the same redesign on all the phones? Not sure, just wild speculation as of right now. Again, we have no idea what a major redesign could look like. We had heard from John Prosser that maybe we'd see like that iPhone 4 style redesign. That could very well be in the picture. But also what's funny is what we've learned from Apple is that our definition as outsiders and Apple's definition of a major redesign, they're two different things.
Different
Apple says at the Series 6 and Series 7 Apple Watch, that was a generational leap that resulted in a major redesign, which anyone who looks at those, they look almost exactly the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if the 15 is like slightly different. Maybe we get like some new colors, and I think there's some rumors about stainless steel, or rather titanium on the Pros. I'm not sure what that redesign is going to look like, but that at least is a major rumor for the 15. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I hope there's a redesign, but I just wouldn't be surprised if the regular phones look the same. And because we've also heard at the same time that they're going to be pushing the pros and the regulars further apart. What better way to do that to make them actually look strikingly different? You know, that would instantly be a, I don't know, maybe it's not more affordable because they have to do like retooling on all the machines, but it seems easier than having to develop a new feature, right? Let's just change the way it looks. That way you know this is a completely different phone that you spent more money on. I don't know. I could see that happening, and they just keep this 15 design or 14 design as the 15 design going forward. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I could see it happening. And then I can also see them keeping around the 13, 14, and 15 all at the same time, which then kind of leads us in the exact same boat. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, actually, here's another question. Next year, do they keep the 14 plus around as the same time as they have the 15 plus? Because then that really makes the 15
it
plus
really
not make
depends
any
on
sense.
It really depends on the design, because what we're seeing from Apple more and more now is they like to keep these older products around, but it's almost to their detriment that they're around. I understand, like, on a logical sense, oh, we can have more options and more price points. That sounds great. But also it can be really confusing. And also it's not going to do you any favors when someone walks in who maybe is willing to spend the money on a newer 14, for example, and then they see the 13 and they go, well, this is really the same. It's just like, I feel like they've really got to nail down how they're going to manage that inventory moving forward. I think that if the 15 does get a redesign, that's going to be a more compelling reason to upgrade. But if it looks the same, then it's probably not going to bode well for them.